On today's show, it was an interesting morning at Senators practice. We'll have all the latest injury updates for you today.
And the trade deadline is just 10 days away. So we take a look at some new trade deadline targets.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today is Tuesday, February 25th, and Pilsy, holy smokes, what a day at practice. Brady Tkachuk comes out, stays on for 16 minutes, then leaves. Shane Pinto was out there in a non-contact jersey, but the best news, Josh Norris looks like he's slated to be good to go tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, let's start positive, Ross. Actually, let's do a positive sandwich here. We'll start positive. First piece of bread, nice, positive. What are you feeling like? Rye bread, sour bread? What are we going with?
I just had rye bread this morning with a fried egg and avocado, so let's start with a rye piece of bread.
All right, rye piece of bread here. Josh Norris coming back. Looks like he's fully healthy. He was taking parts in the line rushes. He was there for the entire practice. I was kind of iffy. Would he come back now, or would they just kind of give him this day off? Then he would have another couple days off before they play the San Jose Sharks at home. But looks like he's ready to go. And we know how much a difference this team roster lines up when they have either Shane Pinto or Josh Norris back. But just having one of them back is obviously not ideal. You want both those guys back, but it's huge having one of those guys back because they don't really have a guy that can elevate and play a second line center without those guys. So Josh Norris coming back is awesome, positive news.
And Brady Tkachuk, speaking to the media right now, is calling his status hopeful for tomorrow.
Yeah, so I guess this would be the fried egg and avocado, the negative part of the sandwich here, because
those are delicious.
Yeah, hey, that's just the way a positive sandwich works, Ross. So he was at practice. He took part in one line rush, basically, I guess, just saying, hey, this is the line I would or will be on if I play. I think Sens fans would have been a lot more at ease if he had stayed there the whole practice, but part of me, and this is just speculation and me trying to send out good vibes, part of me, Ross, is just thinking they're like, okay, get out on the ice, see how you feel. We'll put you on the line. We're going to put you on if you play. And we don't need you to do a full practice. So if you're not feeling 100%, just take the rest of the practice off, go home, rest up, be ready for the game tomorrow. So although that's not fully negative and not fully positive, it's not the best news, but I think at the very least, Ross, it makes me positive that he's going to be a part of Saturday's game at the very least.
Yes, and obviously we'll be boots on the ground, so need a full lineup for that one. Shane Pinto practiced as the fourth line center wearing a red non-contact jersey, so we'll see about an update on Pinto's status, but because of the Ostapchuk and Reinhart send-downs to Belleville, they only have 12 forwards up with those three guys, so we'll see how things shake out the rest of today and tomorrow, leading up to tomorrow night's game against the Winnipeg Jets, who have won 10 straight games. The Lions at practice today, Tim Stützle between Brady Tkachuk briefly and Claude Giroux, Josh Norris between David Perron and Drake Batherson, Ridley Gregg centering Noah Gregor and Michael Amadio, and as I mentioned, Pinto on the fourth line between Matthew Highmore and Adam Gaudette. On the back end, Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub, Thomas Chabot with Nick Jensen, Tyler Clevin with Nicholas Matin-Palo, and the Sens are carrying 8 healthy defensemen right now. Jacob Bernard-Docker and Travis Hamonic skating as the extra pair. Allmark and Forsberg are the goalies. Look, I'm not super confident in Shane Pinto playing, especially wearing the jersey and being in a fourth line role, something he hasn't played in not once this season. So maybe it's 11-7 for a fourth straight game. They've lost 4 in a row too, by the way.
Yes, yeah. I wonder if there's any correlation there, Ross, or if that's just a coincidence.
And it was basically 11-6 for the first of those losses because Pinto got hurt 4 minutes in.
Yeah, so I guess there's more filling in the middle of this sandwich. The fact that Pinto is not in a regular jersey, that sucks. And then the fact that they're gonna go, or it appears they're gonna go 11-7 again here. Like, what if Brady can't play? They're gonna have to call someone up again pretty quickly here. So this is gonna be an interesting scenario, but unless you have more to add to that, Ross, I have the remaining positive sandwich piece of bread here.
Well, the quotes are coming out right now. TSN 1200 just saying that Tkachuk is quoted as saying he left practice early to be cautious. Says he suffered a lower body injury just before he ran in to the post. He felt something just before the collision.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess like we don't have to do detective work to find out when it happened. The fact that it's happened is the issue.
We already reported it is not a right wrist injury.
Yeah, signing autographs all day long. So the good news, Ross, is let's take a look at that decor. I like the way that decor looks, and for the first time in I don't know how long, the coaching staff has Travis Hamonic slated to be at least not in the top 6. Now, if they go 11-7, I'm sure he's going to be the 7th guy, and Martin Palo, or he'll be the 6th guy, and Martin Palo will act as the 7th, as that's kind of been the case. But it's good at least to see that they're putting the proper pairs together in the line rushes.
Well, Martin Palo played almost 2 minutes more than Hamonic in the game against Montreal Canadiens. Yeah. How about this? Hamonic had 17 shifts for 9 minutes and 17 seconds. Get on, get off. Get on, get off.
Hey, that's good. Keep the legs fresh.
Yeah, exactly. So let us know in the comments if you like this alignment and if you think Brady Tkachuk will play tomorrow. The Sens obviously need Brady as soon as possible, as there are 25 games left in the season. And we'll get into this conversation more on the other side of which Ottawa Senators are under the most pressure to perform these last 25 games. It's almost like an X factor, but I want more than just one name. Who needs to step up and elevate their game if the Senators are going to make playoffs? But we got a couple minutes here in the first segment, so why don't we take a look at the out-of-town scoreboard that we're going to be rooting for tonight. Plug your nose, but we're all in on the Toronto Maple Leafs tonight. They're on the road against the Boston Bruins. Like, that's the one of only a couple matchups where you need the Bruins to lose this game in regulation.
There we go. Okay, I was worried you weren't going to get the wording right again here. We were going to have to go over this once more, Ross. We want the Boston Bruins to lose that game. That's how you say that.
Okay. In regulation.
Yes.
Then we've got the Montreal Canadiens, who are now 5 points back of Ottawa. So they've got a tough test because Carolina's coming in after an embarrassing third period where they really got rolled over by the Toronto Maple Leafs in their last game. So I like the Hurricanes in this game in Montreal.
And Ross, the Hurricanes are under a lot of pressure right now because the Sharks are swarming around Mikko Rantanen right now. And Elliot Friedman reported that they went to Rantanen with a big offer, and he was like, I'll think about it. So that's not exactly great if you're the Hurricanes. So all eyes are going to be on them.
We're rooting for the Dallas Stars in Columbus, taking on the Blue Jackets. The Blue Jackets' home record in particular is just phenomenal this season. So we need a big win for the Dallas Stars there. We're going to be rooting for the Oilers over the Lightning, but as we said yesterday, that really doesn't matter anymore. The Lightning are too good of a team, and they've caught their stride. I think they're more of a threat for Florida and Toronto to climb the Atlantic Division standings rather than look behind us in the rearview mirror. They left us in the rearview mirror with those 2 games down in Tampa 2 weeks ago. We're rooting for the New York Islanders to beat the New York Rangers. That in regulation would be a huge one there, because even though if the Islanders win, all of a sudden they're in the mix, they don't scare me as much as the New York Rangers do. So let's get a win for the Islanders in that game. And then finally, the Detroit Red Wings, who somehow snuck away with 2 points after blowing a 4-1 lead to Anaheim. They're in Minnesota tonight, and Joel Eriksson-Ek is gone from this game. So that's a shorthanded Wild team with no Kaprizov and no Eriksson-Ek. So tough. And they were also a team that erased a big deficit against Detroit last weekend and were able to come back and get an overtime win. So we're rooting for the Wild in that game. Big out-of-town scoreboard tonight, Billsy, and only 3 games tomorrow. The Senators are the only relevant team in the East wildcard race tomorrow, so a lot of scoreboard watching tonight for us.
Yeah, I mean, after yesterday only had 2 games and none of them of any consequence to the Sens. This is a whole new night in the NHL as far as Eastern Conference playoff race goes.
So sit back, enjoy the scoreboard watching. We are heavily cheering for those teams. We'll post on Twitter exactly who you're going to be rooting for. Best case scenario for the Sens. Like if Columbus wins tonight, if Boston wins tonight, either one of those things happen, the Sens are not in a playoff spot tomorrow. But as we said, if you lose 4 in a row, do you deserve it? Got to earn it yourselves. The Sens have all the opportunity in the world. Only 10 of their final 25 games are against teams that are in a playoff spot right now.
Yeah, and they hardly have any road games. And the road games they do have, they're not traveling very far. Like the only West road games are Chicago and Nashville, right?
Yeah, not Nashville. They already played in Nashville, Chicago, and
There was one more. No, that's it. Just Chicago.
Just Chicago. Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Just
Pillsy,
a house
by the
of
way,
horrors for me.
yeah, exactly, and it's literally on the 3-year anniversary.
Love it. Awesome.
Or 2-year anniversary of you going to that game. One quick note. No, you definitely shouldn't. We got things to do before that. You're going to be too tired after our great weekend in the nation's capital. Just a quick note, because I was shocked when I saw this, and the Winnipeg Jets got the win last night in overtime against San Jose. They tied it with 29 seconds left. Did you know? And the Jets have won 10 in a row. They're coming to Ottawa. You can't win 11 in a row in Ottawa. That's the rule. Pills, he set that yesterday on the show. They're the first team in NHL history to win back-to-back games when trailing in the final minute of regulation.
Oh, man, yeah, that team just cannot lose. Like but that's pretty crazy that San Jose had them right on the ropes like that. The 32nd team having the top team in their grasp right there and then letting it slip, that's tough.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good tank loss, I guess.
The deserve to win a meter was very heavy in favor of the Jets in that game. But credit to Vanacek, he played well. We'll have a full preview of that Sens game tomorrow. Obviously, that game matters in 2 ways because Sens are taking on the Sharks. And the Sharks, you mentioned last night, but also against Calgary, they're no pushover right now. They're battling, and you got to give them credit for that. Dude, I know he signed for term and dollars, but you know that Tyler Toffoli would be tied for first on the Sens in goals?
Man, I've been a Tyler Toffoli guy for years. When they went Dadonov instead of Toffoli in that free agency period, obviously I was a big Dadonov guy. Didn't work out, unfortunately, but like that was huge. And Toffoli is a guy that everywhere he goes, he's been traded and moved around a lot, but he's had success everywhere he goes. He's such a good player.
Yeah, so that's too bad. I saw that on the stat card. I was like, what? Man, what a player. Would have been such a good fit in Ottawa. Later on in this show, we'll discuss who could be good fits for Ottawa at the trade deadline. On the other side, though, who needs to step up for the Ottawa Senators to make playoffs? That's next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. Hey, maybe Steos is thinking, I got to hire someone yesterday before the trade deadline. Well, how can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Have you been in that spot where you need the right hire and you need it fast? The pressure's on, and every single day without the right person is setting your business back. That's exactly when Indeed sponsors jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. So you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Senators podcast. That's Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need.
Today's episode is brought to you by our very good friends at the Glebe Central Pub. You can find the GCP at 779 Bank Street. Go there for great food, awesome drinks, an atmosphere to match, live music every Saturday night. They've also got all sorts of great deals going on at the GCP. Like, how about the Sens game day deal? Tell them you listen to Locked On Sens. Get 10% off your order on home and away games. That's a great, great deal. And it goes hand in hand with the Glebe Central Pub Sens bus to Senators home games, just $17. The bus leaves the pub an hour and 15 minutes before puck drop and will bring you right back to the pub after the game. The full list of games is online at glebecentralpub.com. They've got tickets available for the shuttle tomorrow against the Winnipeg Jets. And then Saturday, we will be on the GCP shuttle. I cannot wait for that experience. We're going to hang out all afternoon at the Glebe Central Pub. So come in, even if you're not taking the shuttle, we'd love for you to. But if you're going to the game, even if you're not going to the game, come by and have a pint, have a great time at the Glebe Central Pub. The vibes are free at the GCP. You can find them at 779 Bank Street, walking distance from Lansdowne. It's in the heart of the Glebe, and it is the neighborhood pub to go have a great time. Go there at the Glebe Central Pub. We'll see you this Saturday at the Glebe Central Pub. All right, Millsy. So the Ottawa Senators, with 25 games left in the regular season, 15 of those games are at home, 10 games against playoff teams as it stands today. But there have been ebbs and flows, as there are any season, but it feels very dramatic with the Ottawa Senators. You think of certain players like Shane Pinto going 19 games without a point and then being one of the most valuable players in the next half of the season. You look at Drake Batherson, complete opposite. He started out so hot. He's been ice cold recently. Brady Tkachuk had that 10-game pointless streak. Otherwise, he's had game-winning goals in overtime. He's played well at times. Tim Stützle's on a career-high 9-game point streak right now. Linus Ullmark went 8-0-1 in 9-game stretch. He's had other stretches that aren't good.
Jake Sanderson started the season off slow. Now he's figured it out. Like, it's the ebbs and flows of, you could pretty much go down the entire lineup, Ross, and no one's really been that consistent.
So what consistency do they need to find in these last 25 games to make the playoffs?
Well, Ross, this one kind of ties into our trade deadline targets, but if the Ottawa Senators want to figure out one of their biggest issues internally, I've mentioned this a couple times, so I'm going to stick to it. David Perron's going to have to really figure it out. Like, he was brought in my opinion, to be that sixth guy to fill in the top six. They gave him a 2-year deal, $4 million. They expect somewhere in the 35 to 40 point range for him. And it's been tough sledding for him. He only has 1 goal and 3 assists in 19 games this year. And he hasn't been able to find a line where he fits nicely. He hasn't really been able to put a big impact on any games. Like, I can't really think of like a David Perron moment this year. So
that one timer that was saved against Florida, it might have hit the post in the home opener. That was cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's if we're chalking it down to that and the first game of the year, then it's tough to really have a lot to show for David Perron. But I don't know. I believe in the player, and the Ottawa Senators, Steve Stais, certainly believed in him and is expecting more from him. So unless the Ottawa Senators are going to go and figure this problem out externally, which maybe they do with some of our targets that we're going to look at, David Perron for me is the guy that is going to have to figure things out to make this team work.
And we always have to preface it by saying, obviously, the family situation was most important, but it seems like everything's healthy on that front, which is amazing news. Great to hear. But if you had told me preseason that on February 25th, David Perron would be tied in points with Matthew Highmore and Zach Ostapchuk, I would have had a very raised eyebrow at that. So he needs to get it going, get consistency into his game, and hopefully get a couple of big moments. Like you said, like, he needs to have moments where it's like, oh yeah, David Perron scored that big goal when we needed it. Like, think even Nick Jensen has a few of those moments. The Carolina game where it was 1-0 and then he scores a huge goal. He scores the goal against Boston that started the 2-goal comeback. Like, you need to have moments where it helps your team vault into getting points. So David Perron, a very good first choice as a guy who needs a huge final 25 games. Pilsy, I'm going to go with another obvious choice, Drake Batherson. When he's on, the team's on. And this is obviously health permitting for all of them. Like, you could easily say Josh Norris and Shane Pinto have to stay healthy. Duh. This is for guys who are healthy, what they have to do in the lineup. And when Drake Batherson's at his best, he's drawing defenders into him and then distributing the puck with his great vision. He's got great hands. I didn't know he had the hardest shot on the team. Hopefully that's a bit of a confidence booster where he can go and rip the pill and try to get some shots on goal and create more that way. But it just feels like he's been a bit of a half step behind recently. It almost feels like he's playing like he did when he came back from that high ankle sprain. And then it felt like he got past it. He had an extra jump. He was finishing his hits there in the first half of the season. And it feels like he's skating in mud a little bit right now. So I'd like to see Batherson pick up the pace in the offensive zone and just in a 200-foot setting. And I don't think I'm going to get that point per game Batherson hot take anymore. It was looking good through 40 games, not so much anymore. But if he can be a point per game player in these last 25 games and get 25 points, I think the Sens have a good chance at making playoffs.
Yeah, and I think Josh Norris coming back really helps out. But for me, Ross, with Batherson, it's not even the pace that's bothered me. It's been the decision-making, right? Like, look back at that game up against Montreal. Just so many poor decisions that led directly to goals. Like, let's talk about that first goal where Brendan Gallagher scores. Even if like Batherson's beside his own net and he tries to make a cross-ice pass through the slot, even if he doesn't fan on that pass, Ross, that's not a good play. Like that shouldn't be your first instinct is, oh, I'm in my own end. Let's try to force a pass through the slot where there's a Montreal player right there. And then like what, at best you get a breakout. Like if Gallagher doesn't knock that down or deflect it and he fans on the pass, worst case scenario, and Gallagher buries it. But there've just been a couple decisions where I didn't really love it. Like even the one, it works out for him, but where on the power play, he passed back to Sanderson. There was 3 Montreal Canadian penalty killers, defenders right there. And all of them had eyes on him and sticks in the lane. Now he gets a great sauce pass right on the tape to Sandy and Sandy makes no mistake. So it's tough to kind of nitpick that, but that's not the best decision on the power play, in my opinion, even though it works out. So that's where I think Batherson, just his decision-making, hopefully coming back from the break, you can kind of figure things out again. But yeah, Batherson is a huge part of this team.
So 2 wingers that really need to step up. There's no doubt about that. There's many other players obviously have to continue playing well. Tim Stützle on that 9-game point streak. He's been awesome defensively as well. So he needs to keep it going. But I think that Perron and Batherson are the 2 guys who need to improve off of their play in the recent time to make a push forward. Do the Sens need help, though, at the trade deadline? That conversation is next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day. All right, Millsy. So the trade deadline is 10 days away, and we had a flurry of moves before 4 Nations and nothing since. But it feels like a
Been
lot
one move since.
What? Which one?
Ville Husso.
Oh yeah, they
to the
gave him
Anaheim
away.
Ducks, which actually I kind of want to get into if you want, unless you had a transition lined up here.
No, I'll just say finally to wrap up, because I know that we're going to get a comment or two on this, and you mentioned a goalie. Obviously, Linus Ullmark has to be at his best for Ottawa to make playoffs.
Yes, he was going to be my honorable mention because Ross, like he's such a streaky guy. Like if you look at his game logs, it's 3 losses in a row, and then what? It was like that 8-game stretch that he pulled off. There's the shootout loss to Anaheim in there, but it was a good stretch. So his last 4 games have been L's. Now, obviously, the Edmonton game, he got injured. But he's due for the bounce back and to get back in the W's. Now, sticking on the goaltending, we saw Ville Husso traded to the Anaheim Ducks for future considerations, and Husso, I believe, has like a 3.75 cap hit this year.
4.75.
4.75. Okay. So that's a decent cap hit for the Ducks just to take for no cost to the Detroit Red Wings. And I think
you look into it, and guess who Steve Yzerman's assistant GM was in Tampa?
Who?
Pat Verbeek.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. And those future consideration ones, usually there's some backdoor favor making involved. But we look at that, and then I don't know about you, Ross, but I was pissed. I was like, this really helps out the Red Wings. Like, And you got to wonder, are the Ottawa Senators trying to make that kind of deal moving Forsberg? And then, of course, this is why, and I've mentioned to people that are just like, just send Forsy out, just get rid of him, bring Levy up. Well, kind of ironically, unfortunately, Levy Merlining gets hurt in last night's game. Now, how serious is that injury? Coach David Bell went on TSN 1200 and said Levy's in concussion protocol. The team is taking a look at him, but Levy kind of says, no, I think I'm fine. So it's not going to be a serious injury. But that's the issue. And that's why Sens management is saying, hey, we can't just be rash here and get rid of him. Because then, let's say the Sens were the ones to move Forsy and Levy got hurt. Now you got Linus Ullmark and that's it. And that's the exact issue here. So I think that's where fans want this done quickly, and I still want it done eventually, but I think that's where Sens management is biding their time, because you got to think, like, Forsy's only $2.75 million cap hit. So if Anaheim's willing to do that for a higher cap hit, you think they would have been able to do or willing to do it with the Sens and Forsy. So that's an interesting trade that kind of has some repercussions towards the Ottawa Senators, especially since it's a division rival that you're battling for a wildcard spot within the Wings.
Yeah, I think it should show Steve Staios that there's no way that you're going to have to add a sweetener to Anton Forsberg.
I don't think so. And like, look, say what you want about Forsy, but for a rebuilding team, like he's actually a great rebuilding goalie. Like when he was the Sens like top guy and he was getting 40 plus shots a night, he was battling and keeping teams in it. And that 2.75 on an expiring deal, that's fine for a rebuilding team with cap space.
Yes, so we'll see what happens, because a lot of what we're about to discuss with trade targets would have to at least have Anton Forsberg come off the books.
At least, yeah, starting with that, yes.
Yeah, and look, teams can get creative. There can be a double retention in certain situations. So,
but there's costs. There's a cost attached to that, though.
And the Sens don't have a barrel full of assets. Let's start the conversation with the poll we put up on Twitter yesterday. Is the first round pick untouchable? And the votes are extremely close. Nothing gets me fired up like a close poll. Yep. 52% say that the first round pick is untouchable. 48% say, nah, you traded in the right deal. I saw your comment on it, but relay it. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, I just want to ask, though, Ross, because you didn't specify in this. Did you only mean the 2025 pick?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I did.
So my tweet, let's make sure I get it here. Wouldn't want to misquote Brandon Piller on this podcast. At Brandon Piller 1, I said, only way to justify moving a Sens first round pick is for a top 6 scoring winger with term. No rentals, in my opinion. And I stand by that. And I think a lot of people kind of agree with that, Ross. Like, for me, the Sens first rounders are too valuable right now to be trying to catch lightning in a bottle with a rental and hoping that you can make a big playoff push, or hoping that you can re-sign the guy. You can't mess around with that, in my opinion. We saw what happened with Alex DeBrincat. Alex DeBrincat was the right piece for this team. Like, player-wise, top 6 scoring winger, young. He was an RFA. It seemed like that was going to work out, but the player was not the right fit. Like, at no point in any time in his short time here did it seem like DeBrincat wanted to be here or was going to re-sign or anything. And he made that clear, and he made it very easy for the Red Wings to acquire him, and he signed a great deal with them and is thriving with them. So it was not the right person fit in Ottawa, and that's unfortunate. So you can't get into another situation where you're giving away a first round pick and hoping that you can make something work.
But Pilsy, you know who always enjoys Ottawa? Swedish players. And there's one that's caught your attention as a new trade target.
I am all in on Rickard Rakell, Ross.
And you trade that first round pick for him?
All day, because he fits every single checklist box that I have. So he's a guy, he's 31 years old, so he's a veteran, but not too old. Like, he's not kind of riding off in the sunset here. He can play wing or center. He's a right shot, 6'1", 203 pounds. He's only at $5 million. And Ross, this deal goes for another, I believe, 3 years after this. Let me just double check. Going to Puckpedia. Yeah, he's signed until 2027, 2028. So 3 more years after this at $5 million. He's able to play with top players. He's on a top line with Sidney Crosby right now. In 58 games, he has 25 goals, 24 assists. He's third on the team in hits. So he plays a physical game as well, but he doesn't play an undisciplined game, Ross. He only has 10 PIMs all year. He plays on the power play. Like, he's able to win faceoffs. I mean, he's only taken 23 draws, but he's won over 50% of them. Like, there's no downside to this. He's number 2 on the Athletics trade bait board. Kyle Dubas is looking to replenish that prospect pipeline. He's trading guys away for picks. He wants to get big drafts. So for me, Rickard Rakell is the exact player I'm looking for. Put him on a line with Tim Stützle, and I think you can make magic. So he would be my number 1 trade target.
And he was at the Four Nations with Team Sweden. So Daniel Alfredsson's worked with him recently. So they'd have some inside talk there. Also, if you're looking at it from Pittsburgh's perspective, who would imagine as a rebuilding team, strange to say, well, they still have Sidney Crosby playing at that level, but it's clear the direction that Pittsburgh's going. They've got lots of draft picks already, but guess who's their head scout? Trent Mann. So he would have a very good idea of which prospects he would want to take. Maybe a guy he drafted 10th overall, but on jokes aside, he would be a guy who would look, and obviously Kyle Dubas is a diehard Sens fan, so they would know the Sens prospect pool, and if there was a guy they would want to target there.
It's the perfect fit. I hadn't really looked into it before. I was kind of dialed in on Jared McCann, but this makes so much more sense for both parties involved, and I can't think of a player that would fit better for the needs that the Ottawa Senators have. So I love it. I'm all in.
49 points this season would be second on the Ottawa Senators by 3 points more than Drake.
He would lead the team in goals, 25.
Yeah, so I'm agreeing with you there. I would be willing to do a lot to get it done.
Yeah, the first round pick, you start with that. I mean, JBD is probably a guy you put in there as well. And then maybe even another draft pick, another roster player, and another prospect if you need. Because like Rickard Rakell signed for a couple more years, and $5 million is so affordable, especially with the cap going up.
Well, it's affordable next year. You'd have to work out the cap this year. That's the only issue there.
But according to Puckpedia, the Sens have 1.6 million in cap space. So if you move, not math guys on this show, but if you move Forsberg and JBD, you can just fit that under the cap. And then,
but no, because then you'd have to call up another goalie. So you're at least getting Levy's 800,000.
Yeah, I guess that's where the issue is. But then, then you maybe move one more player, or you get a tiny bit of retention for an extra draft pick. So that's the hitching point that I overlooked. So I'm glad you caught that.
And the hitching point there is it's harder to ask for retention because you can't be like, hey, just retain for this 1 year.
No.
And that's a lot of term to commit to retention for. It's not unreal, but it is potentially a snafu.
I mean, the Sens did it with Korpisalo.
Yeah, very true. So
that's
we'll
a whole
see.
Different style of deal.
We'll see what happens, but Rickard Rakell, no doubt, has to be up there. Another name that caught my attention, I know we're going to battle on this one, but Ryan O'Reilly from the Nashville Predators. I knew he was the factor. I know he's the 2019 Conn Smythe Trophy winner, Stanley Cup champion, obviously. He's been in the league forever. He's 34 years old. I didn't realize how good of a contract he's on this year and next year at $4.5 million. To me, the perfect fit, which is what we're going to debate here, as a guy who, if more so when Shane Pinto and Josh Norris are out of the lineup, you have an insurance policy having Ryan O'Reilly in the lineup.
So he actually has 2 more years after this one, Ross, at 4.
Even better.
Great player, great contract. The fit doesn't work for me, doesn't make sense for me. Like this screams, and it's almost identical contract. Okay.
No, you're right.
This screams Jacob Chychrun, good player on a good contract. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. It'll be fine. And then it doesn't fit, and then you have to move him for pennies on the dollar. Like Ross, I don't see the fit on this roster in any way, shape, or form, but I will hand it over to you. to try to convince me. Go ahead.
Well, number one, his hockey IQ is off the charts. He's
Agreed.
one of the smartest players in the league, one of the best face-off guys, two-way guy, got elite power play metrics, good on the penalty kill. He's just an all-around great player. And I think if you put him in a lineup with other great players, he'll play well. I know that.
Where do you put him? Where do you put this? This is my. If I was the defense jury or the prosecutor, which is the one that goes against the person on trial. If I'm going against you, that's my one argument. Where do you put him in this lineup?
I probably put him at left wing on the third line, able to take faceoffs, and then obviously he's an insurance policy for any of Stützle, Norris, or Pinto as a guy who can play in the middle of the ice and has for most of his career. And if you get into a playoff matchup, you put him on your matchup line. And anywhere you want that, we still have never seen Norris or Pinto play the wing, but Ryan O'Reilly gives you options in your lineup. And I think he's always the first guy out before practice. He would set the tone that this is a serious team. It's as much for what he brings on the ice as what he does for the locker room and for the team to be like, okay, this guy, he has the expectation of going far in the playoffs, and the work ethic I think would rub off on others as well. He's the guy who, look, if a guy gets hurt, and I know we're getting way ahead of ourselves, he's a guy who gets a letter immediately. Like you are bringing a factor into the lineup.
Yeah, I wanted to be clear. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think he's a great player. But the issue is, it's if you're healthy and you hope to be healthy, I just don't see where he's going to play. I'm not about to spend a valuable first round pick for the Ottawa Senators on a 34-year-old. And then you haven't solved your problem of finding a winger to play with Timmy. Because if you tell me, Ross, you're going to put Ryan O'Reilly and Claude Giroux, two guys in their late 30s that, no offense to them.
34 is late 30s now?
Well, I mean, he's going to go into his late 30s in this deal.
Oh, smokes. Thanks for making me feel old here.
Yeah, hey, we're on the back half of our NHL careers, Ross. The scouts might not pick us if they go to our beer league games. But what I'm saying is, you cannot have a line where with Tim Stützle, you're putting two slower, older veterans as his winger. Like, for me, Ross, what we're trying to do is find the winger for Tim Stützle. Ryan O'Reilly is not that guy.
Correct. That I agree with.
And that's the issue. Like, why go out and get a guy that you're like, oh, he's a great player and we'll find a way to make it work? That cannot be the strategy that the Senators have here if they're moving a first round pick. And you have other guys. I know it's different, but you do have contingency plans for if Pinto and or Norris go down. Ridley Gregg is a guy that plays center and wing, and obviously he's not at a point right now where he can play second line center. He's had to do it, but it's a little out of his range now. But you've got him signed for a couple of years, and hopefully you get him to a point where short term he can fulfill that role. And if you didn't have Claude Giroux, Ross, I think I would be all over this, because they're kind of similar guys in the role they would play on this team. So if there was no Claude Giroux, then I think I would be more interested in this. But for me, it just doesn't make sense to have a Ryan O'Reilly and a Claude Giroux.
And that's fair. But when you look at difference makers, he would be one. And look at the last time he got traded at the deadline to Toronto. He had 11 points in 13 games. They make playoffs. And, that's the only time the Leafs have ever won a playoff series was with Ryan O'Reilly, and he had 9 points in 11 games in the playoffs. Like, he is a difference maker.
Totally, and that's fair, but he's just not the difference player that the Ottawa Senators need. And I don't know, I'm saying I don't know this. I don't know how inclined he would be to want to come to Ottawa. I don't know.
He's an Ontario guy.
Yeah, but a Toronto guy. Like he was one of the guys with the Leafs jammies, wasn't he? Like, it was a big deal for him to go there. So I don't know. It just, all the things you're saying about the player and the contract are correct. Great player, wrong fit.
This comes off the heels of Jacob Bernard-Docker being potentially linked to the Nashville Predators. So it had me looking at Nashville's lineup, and I was like, dude, if you can get Ryan O'Reilly, man, I'd be all over that. Other names that we had on our list, still, we've already discussed a few of them, so we don't have to get into them too much. But just if people are curious now, 10 days until the deadline, if the Sens get any of these 6 players, that to me is a difference maker for how the rest of the season goes. Ryan Donato, Brandon Tanev, Jared McCann, and Trent Frederick. A lot of different contracts. McCann and O'Reilly and Rakell with term. Ryan Donato, Trent Frederick, and Brandon Tanev are all pending unrestricted free agents after the year. So what you're going to give up or offer in each of those situations is very different, but they all move the needle for me as guys who would give this team more depth up front, which we have clearly identified as a big need now. And we're seeing it with guys who are playing in the fourth line who really should be in Belleville. So we'll see, man. 10 days. What's the over under on how many trades Steve Staios makes between now and then?
Well, this is what I was thinking too. Trades and players moved, I think, is a discussion because, like, Forsey.
How many roster changes will there be?
Yeah, okay. Forsey and JBD, if you're going to make any sort of consequential move, they have to go. And I again, nothing against those guys. I actually think it would be good for them to find new opportunities, but you need to find cap space to do anything in this deadline. So that's the issue there. For me, Ross, and I've mentioned this, so I won't go too into it. Brandon Tanev, I have no interest. $3.5 million is just too much money for a guy like that.
The town's not big enough for another Brandon, eh?
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that. So it's personal for me. No, but just $3.5 million for a guy that at best is going to play on your third line just does not make sense for me. If you want to go that route, go Trent Frederick. I'm much more interested in that. Ryan Donato, I think he's going to be a hot commodity at the deadline, and you're going to have to outbid guys, and he's on an expiring deal. So unless you feel like you can extend him, he is a player that I think could play with Timmy. He's playing really great with Connor Bedard right now, so he can play with top guys, but he's in line for a big payday, and I think there's going to be teams going after him. So for me, it's between Rickard Rakell, Trent Frederick, and then Jared McCann. I think what's happening, and Elliot Friedman has talked about this, is teams are calling Seattle about him. Seattle's not actively moving him, so you're really going to have to blow them out of the water, especially he's a top guy for them, and they're trying to figure things out. They're not exactly in a rebuild stage, so I don't know how realistic that is. So that's where I stand.
And if you want to get unrealistic, obviously JJ Peterka is the dream.
Okay, I thought you were going to go Mikko Rantanen, Ross, and I was going to have to pull you down from the clouds here. Yeah, JJ Peterka would be amazing, but I mean, you would really have to show the Buffalo Sabres that you're the top offer here, because that is a guy. Imagine him playing with Tim Stützle, two Germans together. That would just be electric.
Yeah, Peterka, by the way, has 42 points this season.
Yeah,
after
and I
28
believe
goals, 50 points last year. He's 23 years old as well.
Is now, his entry-level deal expiring this year, Ross, or next?
After this year.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's where
Pending
you get into that scary territory again. You think you're all warm and cozy with the RFA there, but it doesn't always work out.
Oh, my goodness. What a conundrum. And we've talked about how different it is than us talking about how to get to the cap floor, but this is fun, man. These are meaningful games, and we got a big one tomorrow night for the Ottawa Senators taking on the Winnipeg Jets. Game day preview tomorrow. Pillsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Final thoughts for me is a big shout out to the Belleville Senators. They went to Cleveland, Ross, and they beat the Monsters twice. 2-1 in their own barn. We kind of had tabs on last night's game. The Ottawa Senators were able to tie it and bring it to overtime despite Levi Merilainen getting hurt early on in that game. So that's huge for them. Definitely check out Coach Bell's interview on TSN 1200. Lots of good info there. Coach Bell is just such a beauty. We've had him on the show a couple times, so he's always good for a couple laughs too. And yeah, they are now, Ross, 2 points out of that coveted playoff spot. Now they've caught up in the games played, so they only have 2 games in hand on the Syracuse Crunch. So that margin is getting thinner, but hey, if they keep on finding ways to win like they have, I think they can get it done.
And shout out to recently sent down Cole Reinhardt, who scored the lone goal in regulation for Belleville on a sick dish from our guy, Stephen Halliday. Final thoughts from me. One more day to get your donations in for the MDM. If you missed yesterday's, or DMD rather, sorry, I'm really having trouble. Duchenne. And they've got the great prizes coming up. The raffle is going to come on Thursday, and we really want to see them hit that goal. It just shows how tight knit the Sens community is. And helping out someone who's new to the organization. I think it would just be such a nice welcoming thing to be like, oh man, everyone rallied around that. We're seeing lots of familiar names on the list of donors and lots of anonymous ones too. It's just great to see, and they're closing in on their goal here. So let's help the Jensen family. Let's help a great cause and donate to the Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy Foundation that the Jensens are heading. We'll be back tomorrow for a game day preview. For today, we say goodbye. Thank you for liking, watching, listening, and engaging with the show. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.